Chapter 2 The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. The story begun by Walter Hartwright. Summer was drawing to a close, and we, the weary pilgrims of the London pavement, were beginning to think of the cloud shadow on the cornfields and the autumn breezes on the seashore. For my own poor part, the fading summer left me out of health, out of spirits, and, if the truth must be told, out of money as well. During the past year, I had not managed my professional resources as carefully as usual, and my extravagance now limited me to the prospect of spending the autumn economically between my mother's cottage at Hampstead and my own chambers in town. The evening, I remember, was still and cloudy. The London air was at its heaviest. The distant hum of the street traffic was at its faintest. The small pulse of the life within me and the great heart of the city around me seemed to be sinking in unison, languidly and more languidly, with the sinking sun. I roused myself from the book which I was dreaming over rather than reading, and left my chambers to meet the cool night air in the suburbs. It was one of the 2 evenings in every week that I was accustomed to spending with my mother and my sister, so I turned my steps northward, in the direction of Hampstead. Events which I have yet to relate make it necessary to mention in this place that my father had been dead some years at the period of which I am now writing, and my sister Sarah and I were the sole survivors of a family of 5 children. My father was a drawing master before me. His exertions had made him highly successful in his profession, and his affectionate anxiety to provide for the future of those who were dependent on his labours has impelled him, from the time of his marriage, to devote to the ensuring of his life a much larger portion of his income than most men consider it necessary to set aside for that purpose. Thanks to his admirable prudence and self-denial, my mother and sister were left, after his death, as independent of the world as he had been during his lifetime. I succeeded to his connection, and have every reason to feel grateful for the prospect that awaited me at my starting in life. The quiet twilight was still trembling on the topmost ridges of the heath, and the view of London below me had sunk into a black gulf in the shadow of the cloudy night, where I stood before the gate of my mother's cottage. I had hardly rung the bell before the house doors opened violently. My worthy Italian friend, Professor Pesca, appeared in the servant's place, and darted out joyously to receive me with a shrill of foreign parody on an English accent cheer. On his own account, and I must be allowed to add, on mine also, the Professor merits the honour of a formal introduction. Accident has made him the starting point of the strange family story with which it is the purpose of these pages to unfold. I had first become acquainted with my Italian friend by meeting him at certain great houses where he taught his own language and I taught drawing. All I knew of the history of his life was that he had once held a situation in the University of Padua, where he had left Italy for political reasons, the nature of which he uniformly declined to mention to anyone, and that he had been for many years respectably established in London as a teacher of languages. Without being actually a dwarf, for he was perfectly well proportioned from head to foot, Pesca was, I think, the smallest human being I had ever seen out of a shadow room. Remarkable anywhere by his personal appearance, he was still further distinguished among the rank and file of mankind by the harmless eccentricity of his character. The ruling idea of his life appeared to be that he was bound to show his gratitude to the country which had afforded him an asylum and a means of subsistence, by doing his utmost to turn himself into an Englishman. Not content with paying the nation in general the compliment of invariably carrying an umbrella and invariably wearing gaiters and a white hat, the Professor further inspired to become an Englishman in his habits and amusements, as well as his personal appearance. Finding us distinguished as a nation by our love of athletic exercises, the little man, in the innocence of his heart, devoted himself impromptu to all our English sports and pastimes whenever he had the opportunity of joining them, firmly persuaded that he could adopt our national amusements of the field by an effort of will precisely as he adopted our national gaiters and our national white hat. I had seen him risk his limbs blindly at a fox hunt in a cricket field, and soon afterwards I saw him risk his life just as blindly in the sea at Brighton. We had met there accidentally and were bathing together. If we had been engaged in any exercise peculiar to my own nation, I should, of course, have looked at Pesca carefully, but as foreigners are generally quite as well able to take care of themselves in the water as Englishmen, it never occurred to me that the after-swimming might merely add one more to the list of many exercises which the professor believed he could learn impromptu. Soon after we had both struck out from shore, I stopped. Finding my friend did not gain on me, and turned round to look for him. To my horror and amazement, I saw nothing between me and the beach but two little white arms which struggled for an instant above the surface of the water, and then disappeared from view. When I dived for him, the poor little man was lying quietly coiled at the bottom in a hollow of shingle, looking at many degrees smaller than I had ever seen him look before. During the first minutes that elapsed, while I was taking in, the air revived him, and he ascended the steps of the machine with my assistance. With the partial recovery of his animation came the return of his wonderful delusion on the subject of swimming. As soon as his chattering teeth would let him speak, he smiled vacantly, and he thought it must have been the cramp. When he thoroughly recovered himself and joined me on the beach, his warm southern nature broke through all artificial English restraints in a moment. He overwhelmed me with the wildest expression of affection, exclaimed passionately in his exaggerated Italian way that he could hold his life henceforth at my disposal, and declared that he should never be happy until he found an opportunity of proving his gratitude by rendering me some service which I might remember on my side to the end of my days. I did my best to stop the torrent of his tears and protestations by persisting in treating the whole adventure as a good subject for a joke, and succeeded at last, as I imagined, in lessening Pesca's overwhelming sense of obligation to me. Little did I think then, little did I serving me for which my grateful companion so ardently longed was soon to come, that he was eagerly to seize it on the instant, and by doing so he was to turn the whole current of my existence into a new channel, and to alter me to myself amongst past recognition. Yet so it was. If I had not dived for Professor Pesca when he lay under the water on his shingle bed, I should in all human probability never have been connected with the story with which these pages will relate. I should never, perhaps, have heard even the name of the woman who has lived in all my thoughts, who had possessed herself of all my energies, who had become the one guiding influence that now directs the purpose of my life. Thank you for letting me read to you tonight. If my voice helped you relax or drift off, I'd be so grateful if you pressed the subscribe button and turned on the notification bell. It really helps me continue creating these bedtime stories for you. Sweet dreams, lovely. I'll see you in the next chapter.